Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewicki. Latest reports indicate that, having lost its patience with Putin, the Trump administration is now considering giving Ukraine greater leverage in the war. On the table are authorized deep strikes into Russia, possibly even new deadly weapon types. But with the latter, Europe would be expected to play a major role in their funding. Could this give Ukraine the edge, as well as prove an opportunity for major European players, such as the members of the Weimar Triangle, to assert their position as Kiev's allies? Joining us here today is Andreas Umland, analyst from the Swedish Institute for International Affairs. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thanks for having me again.
So, President Volodymyr Zelensky recently said, and I quote, "If Russia loses the ability to strike in the skies, it will be unable to continue the war and will have to look for other ways to coexist." Do you think that moment can actually come soon, with the promise, or at least the suggestion, that new weapons from the US might be in the pipeline for Ukraine?
I would hope so, although I think such an effect would only be possible once these strikes are actually done and once they are successful and indeed the Russian leadership then changes its calculations for this war. The current talk about delivery of these weaponry and its use and so on, it's insufficient, and we have seen a lot of talk in the last months, and Russia can only be converted, so to say, with material deeds and with real action on the ground.
And do you think that the recent statements coming from US President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Keith Kellogg, all basically pointing towards the same direction, i.e. we are preparing to give Ukraine more opportunities to fight back, are they also intended to justify this to their audience, to their voters, basically by saying, look, we tried our best negotiating with Russia, Russia simply won't budge, so we need to find another way to stop this?
Yes, I think the primary reason for this turn in the rhetoric of Washington is that, in spite of a lot of pro-Russian propaganda and anti-Ukrainian propaganda as well in the American ultra-conservative media, the majority of Americans and even the majority of Republicans and even a large part of the MAGA movement remain or are again pro-Ukrainian and critical of Russia, especially of Putin. And so there is a domestic demand for more action. There's a sympathy for Zelensky, and there are the elections, the midterm elections next year. And these sort of internal considerations, I think, are the main driver of all of this. I have my doubts that Trump and Vance are really caring that much about Eastern Europe and about Ukraine. They are now turning around because they see that this is popular in the US.
And now, do you expect Tomahawk missiles to actually make their way into Ukraine? I'm asking because some commentators still say this could be escalatory. So ultimately, the final call is down to President Trump. This is what J.D. Vance said, that Trump would have to make the decision. Do you think he's going to do that? And how Russia is likely to react to this?
Yes, I think that's possible. These are, one should remember, old weapons. They are from the times of the Cold War, and this is nothing particularly modern. And I also actually expect that Russia will be able to defend itself against these cruise missiles. So I don't think they will actually make that much of a difference, and perhaps the US does not need them anymore and is now replacing them with more modern weaponry. I don't think this will change much. In symbolic terms, yes, because this is a brand, Tomahawk, and so it will play a certain role, but I don't think this will actually make that much change.
Well, so far, Russia has difficulties in defending itself against slow-flying drones. So don't you think a cruise missile with fairly sophisticated guidance systems wouldn't really make a difference? After all, Ukrainians have introduced recently their own type of cruise missile known as the Flamingo, and that one is fairly simple in its design. Nevertheless, even that is expected to make a major splash on the battlefield. So a Tomahawk perhaps even more so, do you think?
Well, if the amount of these cruise missiles will be higher, then I think that could indeed make a difference. But we'll have to see. There have been lots of these speculations over the last months about new weaponry, and I would like to see first them arriving and then being deployed and then actually having an impact, and then one can judge whether this is really something that can make a change and perhaps even modify, let's say, the calculations in Moscow.
So there is also the question of financing. Europe is actually expected to carry that weight to a large extent. We even have signals from many European leaders that they understand this position of the US. We actually had Prime Minister Donald Tusk saying recently, and I quote, "America has the right to expect greater involvement from Europe, much like we have the right to expect America to treat the transatlantic community as an absolute priority." So do you think that countries such as, for example, Weimar Triangle members Poland, Germany and France will increase their efforts when it comes to financing weapons for Ukraine?
Well, there's nothing else that the European countries can do because Washington has now a very myopic view of this war. It has forgotten about its crucial role in the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine in the early 1990s. No European country was involved in that. That was a trilateral negotiation between Ukraine, Russia, and the US. The nuclear disarmament of Ukraine is, of course, one of the reasons of this war. That is now forgotten, and also the security assurances given then are forgotten. And also there seems to be a strange calculation that Russia is just interested in European affairs and it's not interested in world affairs. In earlier times, the Soviet Union was seen as a global competitor and enemy of the US. Now this is different. Russia is seen as a purely European actor, and therefore the US does not want to pay for this war. Although, in fact, if you look at the Russian ideology, if you look at the Russian-China alliance and the whole new world security structure that is now emerging, then you would understand that Russia is a global competitor and perhaps even enemy of the US. And so Ukraine is doing a good job here for the US in terms of fighting Russia, and one could expect from the US to support also with their own help. The Americans support Ukraine with their own help, but they have now chosen to let Europe pay for it.
So the Warsaw Security Forum conference, which is taking place today, one of the main thoughts, so to say, which underpin all those deliberations is divided we fall. Do you think that Europe has now seen enough to understand that this need for unity is greater than ever? And I'm talking about, the drone incursions, not just into Poland, but other countries as well. Probably Russian drones, still not confirmed, but likely. Other types of activities, sabotage, election meddling. Do you think that this is the final call?
Yes, I think these actions by Russia were perhaps miscalculated. I think one of the drivers of this Russian provocation in Poland, in Denmark, in Romania, was to divide the European countries, but I see so far at least rather a unifying effect. And in the last 9 months, Europe has become much more geopolitical, is taking security affairs much more seriously, and the latest events have just increased the speed of this transformation. It's still going too slow, and Europe is still not ready for this, and that's why it has to buy, for instance, weaponry from the US. But I think it's going in the right direction, and I think the Kremlin has miscalculated with these provocations over NATO territory.
Andreas Umland was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight. And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.